In this interview, we talked to Matthew Berry about his beginning in fantasy football, how he got started, a little behind-the-scenes information from the man, the myth, the legend that paved the way for every analyst in the fantasy football industry. Intro. Top 5 running back. You're watching the Fantasy Football Show. Take a lap. Before we start to get into fantasy, I want to ask you a couple of questions about your background. A lot of people are curious about your climb and when you started in fantasy. So what year did you start in fantasy, and how long? Everybody knows you got acquired by ESPN early in your career, but how long were you grinding, and what was like your mindset? Did you ever envision that you'd be working for ESPN when you first started out, and just kind of paint that picture for people that are grinding it out and trying to climb in the business or in any business? They'd love to hear your kind of story.
Yeah. So first off, by the way, I appreciate the question. I'll say that I would not say that ESPN bought me early in my career. So, and I appreciate you using the word grinding, because that's the truth. I mean, that's the, what's the old saying, it took me a decade to become an overnight success, right? The fact is, so I've been playing fantasy sports since 1984. Mm-hmm. So I joined a fantasy baseball league, rotisserie league baseball, in 1984. I did my first fantasy football league in 1989. I started my own in 1999. I was working as a professional writer out in Hollywood, and I saw that RotoWorld, again, this is back in the days of AOL and CompuServe and dial-up, like, you've got mail. Like, it was actually a novel thing that somebody got. You got an email. Like, people today can't imagine that, but it was one of these, whoa, like you get an email once every 3 days.
Yeah.
Right. And so anyway, RotoWorld had this blind ad saying, like, do you want to write fantasy sports? And so I sent him an email saying, listen, I'm a professional writer living out here in Hollywood. I write for TV and movies, but fantasy sports is my passion. I absolutely love it. And I think it would be so much fun just to write a column on the side. To which they wrote me back the next day, and they said, we looked you up on IMDb. Married with Children is our favorite show of all time. You're hired. So because I wrote for Married with Children, I got a chance to write for a low-trafficked internet website for free.
What episode was it?
I worked on 28 different episodes of the show.
Wow.
I personally wrote 5 of them. So, I mean, we can go through all of them, but you can look it up. I mean, you can look up.
That's amazing.
I think we only actually we wrote 5 of them. We got credit for 4 of them. We had to rewrite somebody. It's a long story. But at any rate, but yeah, I mean, I was a story editor for 28 episodes of Married with Children. I wrote the 250th episode of Married with Children.
Nice.
There you go. So that's a little piece of history there. But anyway, so I did that, and I did that for quite some time. And so, I wrote basketball, baseball, and fantasy football columns for RotoWorld for about 4.5 years. And I started doing some radio appearances as well. And then finally in 2004, people were starting to make money on the internet at that point. And I felt like I had an opportunity. And I at that point, I felt like I developed a big enough audience that I could start my own site. And so I'm skipping a few details. I go into a lot more detail into my book, Fantasy Life. If anyone's interested, you can get that. And you can buy it cheap, by the way, on Amazon these days. But at any rate, I basically started my own website called TalentedMrRoto, which was my nickname on RotoWorld, and TalentedMrRoto.com. But it's not like nowadays you would go out to venture capitalists or, family offices, something like that. You try to raise money. Mm-hmm. Right. And I didn't do any of that. And I just basically scraped together a few bucks of my own that I'd saved and started my own website and grabbed a few people that I thought, that I noticed on message boards to start my own website, including, by the way, Brad Evans. Brad Evans started on Talented Mr. Roto. He was on I found him on a message board. Same with Andy Behrens. Same with a lot of people. Started on Talented Mr. Roto, Christopher Harris, Nando DeFino, so a lot of people. Anyway, but I basically realized that I didn't have any money to market the site. So I realized the only way that I could market the site and tell people to come check out the site was me. So I went to every radio station I could find, every TV station I could find, every website I could find, and said, I will write for you for free. I will come on your air for free. Just link back to my website. Just mention my website. Just, and our promotion was going to be me. And so I just did that. And of course, anytime you're looking for promotion, especially at that time, one of the first places you would go is ESPN. And so I started doing local radio for ESPN in Los Angeles on 710 ESPN. Shout out to Mason in Ireland, who put me on, and Steve Mason especially. And because he was by himself, and then John Ireland joined him. So it's not a knock on John Ireland, who's also awesome. Anyway, so it's 710 ESPN, and they liked me there, and that led to me doing some stuff on Cold Pizza, if you remember that TV show. Yep. And yep. Cold Pizza led to me doing some stuff on ESPN News, which led to me doing some stuff writing for ESPN the magazine. And eventually in 2007, they came to me and they said, yeah, and understand at that point, I'd been slogging for 8 years.
Yeah.
And I mean, right, and I'd been playing fantasy sports at that point for 17 years. And no, I take that back. At the point that ESPN bought my website in 2007, when they came to me, I'd been doing it professionally for 17 years. Sorry, I take that back. I'd been doing it professionally for 8 years.
Let's get a calculator.
Yeah, I was told there'd be no math. I'd been doing it professionally for 8 years, and I'd been playing it, professionally for almost 20. And playing it, I should say, not professionally, but I'd been playing it for almost 20, and doing it professionally for 8. And they came to me and they said, "We've been talking internally about that fantasy football is big enough that we need a guy that we want. We've been looking for a Mel Kiper. We keep talking internally. We need to find a Mel Kiper for fantasy football. We need to find a Mel Kiper for fantasy sports." And we like we like all the work you've done for us so far. At that point, the website was profitable. No one was buying mansions or islands or anything like that, but we were in the black.
Yeah.
And we had a good reputation. We won a bunch of awards, and people really liked the site. And so they were like, you know what? We'd like to buy the website, move you out to Connecticut, and make you the guy. And so, again, that happened, if you want to say relatively early. I mean, it was 8 years in.
Yeah.
But, so definitely, definitely had some luck there in terms of meeting the right people that were fans of mine and that promoted me to the right people. And, I had some lucky networking there. But also that when I got those opportunities, when I got those meetings, I nailed those meetings, and I presented plans about what I would do and how I would do it. And
right.
I was ready when when opportunity knocked, I answered the door. Right. And so, but yeah, man, I mean, I worked my ass off every day for 8 years, and keep in mind, for a while there, I had a real job. And so I would do my real job during the day, and then at night I would work on the website, and honestly, on some level, it probably cost me my first marriage, because I was married at the time, and, she would go to bed and I would stay up late, and then I would sleep in and she'd get up and go to work, and we just were, and she's a lovely woman and we're still friends, but, we split up in 2005, and, and that's definitely one of the reasons why, is because I was pursuing this thing. So, yeah. It was a grind. It was a grind.
It's been a grind. I started in about, I haven't been doing it as long as you, but I think in 2003 I launched Fantasy Football Extreme. I'm not sure if you remember that site back in the day. I looked at your site as somebody I was trying to emulate back then. I got acquired by Fantasy Football Starters, and then now I've started the Fantasy Football Show and Sleeper U not too many years ago. So I'm rebuilding, you could say. But I remember back then in 2003-04, when I started, PayPal wouldn't even let you be their gateway for fantasy football. It was very, very touch and go as to how you could collect money. Yep. And it was crazy. People don't realize how different it was back then, and people did not like fantasy football people. It was it was a slog. It was a slog, and you had to convince people, and it took a listen. I mean, if you read my book, you'll see that the ESPN thing happened, but just to give some inspiration here, I'll just talk about the fact that I was turned, the pitch that I made to ESPN about I shorthanded it for you guys, but I had multiple meetings with ESPN about trying to do more and more with them, obviously.
But I also had those meetings with Fox Sports, with CBS, with Yahoo, multiple meetings with all of them, and they all turned me down. And by the way, ESPN turned me down twice before they ended up ultimately buying the website, and hiring me in 2007. So, yeah, man, I mean, I got a lot of no's, a lot of no's.
You define it as somewhat some luck, but really the hardest working people are the luckiest. That's you turn that into luck. It wasn't. That's hard work. Doing what you did and paving the way. People don't realize how much you paved the way. And make sure you read his book. Amazon. It's called Fantasy Life, right? They can get it. Yeah, get his book. Read it if you're interested. There's a lot of people that are popping up in the fantasy industry left and right, and they're the best this, they're the best that on their Instagram profiles right away, and they want everything now. But like you just painted a map for people. The amount of grind you did before you even got to ESPN's like double and triple what a lot of people have already done that are trying to get into the industry now, and it's just like it's a patient game.
It is. It's 100%. It takes time to build an audience, to build trust, so it's a challenge, and I appreciate you saying that. It's very kind of you, and that's one of the things that I'm most proud of, and is sort of that journey. Because I have to tell you, because I got to ESPN in 2007, and one of the I get there and I think like, wow, I've made it. Like I'm on ESPN, I'm on Easy Street, and then I get there and I realize, oh no. Like half the company doesn't think fantasy football belongs anywhere near on TV. The people that hired me certainly did, but I had to go, as insane as this, it sounds insane to think about it now, but you have to understand in 2007, it was a very different time. And even before then, to your point, like PayPal wouldn't even take it. People weren't sure if it was gambling or not. There were, there were definitely people that thought it was nerdy and too niche, and it should be, online on the internet, and it, didn't belong on TV. And, we to this day, we still struggle to get it significantly on TV. It's on it much more than it ever has been, but it's still, it's not as prevalent as you'd think it would be given the popularity of it. And I spent my first year and a half at ESPN having a meeting with literally every ad sales executive, every radio executive, every Sports Center producer, every NFL Live producer, Baseball Tonight, every single one of our TV shows, the NFL editor and the MLB editor of ESPN.com, explaining this is what fantasy is. This is why it's important to our fans. This is the business case as to why we need to do more coverage, why we need to put more people on TV, why we need to do this, and this. Like a lot of PowerPoints, first year and a half, a lot of PowerPoints.
It's much like blogging in the newspaper world many years ago. It's like, oh, there's this department over here. They blog like they're nothing. They're not going to amount to anything.
Right.
And I kind of feel like even though social media is allowing video to kind of take form in terms of controlling fantasy content, I still feel like there's a lot of opportunity. One of my goals with the Fantasy Football Show, and I do 24-hour live streams, I literally am trying to build this thing really, really fast, is I want to have like a 10 to 2 show every day on YouTube and create this new way to consume fantasy football. It isn't just on social media. It's not just on YouTube. It's going to become like the norm of how you consume it on a daily basis, on a consistent basis. I know there are some shows that kind of try and do that. But I want it to literally be where somebody comes every day, 10 to 2 or 7 to 10 at night. That would ruin my relationship, but
right.
I got to be.
It's what you got to do, man. If you want it, you want to grind it. I mean, I always felt that. I'm like, listen, I think I'm pretty good with stats, but I'm not Nate Silver. I'm not Bill James, right? I'm not as good at stats as Mike Clay, just to give a shout out to, one of my colleagues at ESPN. Mike does a great job, right? And I'm pretty good at breaking down film, but listen, I'm not Dan Orlovsky or Matt Bowen or Teddy Bruschi, to speak of some of my other colleagues at ESPN, right? And so, what I felt like is the one thing that I knew I could control. There was a lot of things that I couldn't control, but the one thing that I could control was how hard I worked. I was just like, I'm just going to outwork everyone. Like, and if I fail, I fail, but at least it won't be because I didn't put in enough effort. And so,
yep.
Like I didn't sleep. I still don't sleep. Right. Yeah. And so you just try to outwork everyone. Right. Well, that's the one thing you can control.
Well, we're all emulating you. as you speak. It's why I grind so hard, and I appreciate you, Matthew. Eckler is another player that I absolutely love in 2020, and I feel like he also top 5 running back. You're watching the Fantasy Football Show.